Hi guys, welcome back. My apologies for the silence over the last few days, but you know, life happens and not always we have the time available to do what we love doing. Anyway, this is the review of the ISN Audio Neo 3. The Neo 3 is a hybrid IEM. It contains 3 drivers. 2 of them are dynamic drivers, and the third one is a planar, a micro planar driver, something along the lines of what we've seen being used in the Celest Phoenixcall. We've seen it being used as well in the C Audio Ringo in a coaxial configuration, and we've seen it recently also being used in the Shozi Midori, the P10. But anyway, over here they've actually used it separately. It's not in a coaxial configuration. You got one of the 6mm drivers being used for the low frequency, a second 6mm driver being used for the mid frequencies, and the third driver, which is a 5.8 microplanar, handling the upper frequencies. The 6mm drivers are not the same 6mm drivers as used, for example, in the Fan 2, in the PENON Fan 2, or in the PENON, the 10th anniversary. It's a totally new driver. In terms of the rest of the configuration, or the characteristics, they rated at 15 ohms impedance, 106 decibels of sensitivity, so it's neither hard nor easy to drive. They're kind of in between. Anyway, this is the usual box that ISN usually gives us their products in. You open it up and then take this away. The IEMs came over there. This is the carrying case. I'll show you the rest of the accessories in a second. This is the carrying case. It's, I guess, acceptable in terms of its size, but I changed the cable, so I couldn't use this case for the cable. This is a cleaning tool. So I've changed the actual carrying case that I'm using. I'm actually using a PENON carrying case. Oh my god, here we go. Brings plenty of tips, which is to be expected from ISN and PENON. They never skimp on that. So there's loads of choices here to make sure that you get the right vibe. There are differences. There are slight differences between them. I actually measured the Neo 3 with these tips. The very slight differences. The one I ended up enjoying the most is the one with the green stem that you can see over here. Green stem. Okay. The stock cable, I apologize, but I do not know where I placed it. I've looked for it everywhere and I cannot find it. What I do know is that it's a cable which is very similar to this cable here. Okay, so my apologies. And although it worked adequately with the Neo 3, I obviously changed and swapped around some cables, and the PENON, space cable, which I've got here, is the one that actually gave me the results that I deemed adequate for me, at least. The space is a very this cable thing is always always such a delicate topic that I don't want to talk too much into it, so that I don't get then maybe criticized heavily. But the reality is that the space is a cable that does introduce very slight changes, but noticeable changes on some IEMs, namely on the serial, which I tried it out. You could notice that the space was introducing or was giving a slight improvement in terms of the tightness of the bass. It just somehow tightened up the sound of the serial. I used it as well on the dome, and I also liked the way that it worked on the dome. On, for example, the Neo 5, I didn't find it to be the ideal match. There are other cables from ISN and from PENON that actually do work better. And in the case here of the Neo 3, which is what we want to know, the space once again introduced what I believe was not that it was missing, but I definitely noticed the difference in terms of the bass between the stock cable and using the space. Definitely granted I've had it now for a couple of weeks, and I've been playing it, and so it's really got a couple of hours on it. I would say it's got maybe about 70 hours of playtime already, so the drivers have loosened up, and things have changed slightly with regards to how the drivers are performing, but without question, the space and the Neo 3 make a very nice, they match very nicely each other. The shell is a resin shell, very simple, very unassuming, very much like you've seen, for example, in the case of the Neo 5, you've seen as well on the PENON Turbo. No flashiness, no unnecessary, designs or anything. It's a semi-transparent shell. You can see inside the drivers quite nicely the two. See if this will focus. The two 6mm over there, and then the planar over there on the left side. So that's the planar there, and those are the two dynamic drivers on the top side. There we go. All right. There we go. It's got this venting hole here, so I didn't experience any issues with driver flex or anything of the sort. The design of the shell's got a nice long nozzle, which is again kind of a common thing on all of the ISN and PENON IEMs. So in terms of the fit, it fits beautifully. And if there is anything that perhaps might hinder the fit slightly, is actually the cable, because the space is a nice cable, but it is a somewhat rigid cable, and the fact that it doesn't have the ear hook as well and everything, it can, if you don't introduce it properly, the IEM into your ear, it can kind of start prying the IEM out of the ears. But that's the only real criticism. Otherwise, like I said, the benefits that I got from the sound of using the space more than make up for whatever minor inadequacy in terms of the fit. So fit is fine. I'm using the medium-sized tips because the length of the nozzle does allow for a nice deep fit, and when that is possible, I use the medium-sized tips and I get a nice deep fit, which again helped with any unnecessary peaks or resonances or anything, and again helped tighten up the bass. And one thing I can tell you from the get-go is for a 6mm driver, this has got some impressive bass performance. I mean, I'm not going to say it's going to perform on the level of the bass, for example, of the Serial, no, but the quality of the bass is very good. That's undeniable, but it's the quantity of the bass that again surprises me, and this is something that as of late, and I guess perhaps maybe the drivers that are available are of better quality, again in conjunction with better execution of the tuning and so on. It's been quite a surprise to see some of these smaller drivers performing very admirably in the bass frequencies. One example that comes to mind straight away is the Kinera, the Loki. I mean, for a 6mm driver to be able to be performing at that level and keeping up with the rest of the drivers, because that's a monster of an IEM in terms of the number of drivers it's got. It's quite impressive. It is very impressive. And in the case here of the Neo 3, that's exactly what we find. We find a 6mm driver that is, in my opinion, performing way above what I was expecting, and doing justice to the ISN PENON house sound. That is undeniable. The moment I started hearing it, even when it was still, let's say, in its early burning stages, again another topic which can raise some controversy, the Neo 3 has definitely nailed the PENON house sound. I'm a fanboy. That's the reality. I like PENON and ISN products. There isn't a single product that I can outright say, no, I didn't like it. No, it's not my thing. No, they all have a particular way of tuning that has been established, and they always, in my opinion, meet that criteria, So whether you're listening to a fan or a fan 2, or then you go on to something like the Globe or the Dome or the Quattro or the Serial or whatever, it doesn't really matter. The sound that has been determined as the objective has been met. So it is somewhat difficult sometimes. I get asked that question, oh, which is better, this one or that one? Is the Quattro better than the Serial? They're different. The Quattro is definitely more bass heavy. It has got more extension up top, but the Serial has got a magic that even, still today, it surprised me, and I've got to try this comparison, and it's an absolute monster of an IEM. Honestly, it is a real monster of an IEM. It does what it's supposed to do really well, and it brings that old school organic type of sound to the table, done exquisitely well. Anyway, enough of that. Let's talk about the sound, because that's what we want to know. I used my Fire Q15. I used my Yuki. I used my KNR-U7. I used a couple of other dongles as well. But this was my 2-3 main go-tos. And the one thing I will say about the Neo is that it is, tips we already know. You always have to, choose the right tip to make it work. The cable, okay, fine. Cable, it's that situation. If you have a lot of cables, go through the cable, see which one maybe suits you better. Okay, but cable, definitely in the case of the space, it matched the Neo better than the stock cable. In terms of source, I would say that a source which is kind of middle of the ground is the best. And what do I mean by that? I mean that the Yuki or any other dongle that was using the 43198 kind of setup, the case as well of the full dongle, the case of the Shio, the case of even its own in-house PENON dongle, they seem to match better with the Neo 3 than something that usually has the ESS DAC chips. So for example, the S9 Pro Ultra, the Martha, it was okay, but I somehow felt that it made the sound lose a little bit of its charisma. It became I'm not going to say overly clinical or overly it just lost that charisma, that old school kind of vibe that all of PENON and ISN IEMs usually have. It kind of wasn't the one that was doing it the best. As well, the Q style, the M15 was the same situation. However, with the Yuki, and with the Aful, those two were the two that worked the best. It was absolutely, really, really good. With the Q15, it was good, but the Q15 has got this more warmer tonality, and the sound of the Neo 3 has a tendency of being on the warmer side. So I got the vibe on some of songs that it was overly warm. It was getting overly. It was losing that balance somehow. Okay, so in my opinion, something middle of the ground in terms of the dongle is of the dongle chip being used is important, and I would say Cirrus Logic is probably the one that will give the best results. And this is something that, sometimes again when I get asked what is the best dongle, well, it kind of depends on what you have, because if you got a brighter sounding IEM or an IEM that is that has the tendency of brighter sounding, maybe something which is a little bit darker will be the ideal. So I would avoid something like from ESS or something along those lines. But if you got a darker sounding IEM, so for example like the Melody, I found the Melody, so something like the Truth Here is the Melody, I find that with something like an ESS dongle using that chipset, it kind of matches it better and allows the melody to be a little bit more balanced out, because it is a planar driver that is very bass emphasized. Okay, anyway, enough of that. I'm kind of diverging and steering away from the objective. Talking now or going into the sound, which is what we want to know ultimately. What do I think of the Neo 3? The Neo 3 has got a sound which is very much along the lines of what I described in my review of the R1 as the sound of the Serial. Okay, These two IEMs are kind of hinting at the serial in terms of the overall sound and tonal balance and everything. What do I mean by that? I mean that you get that same sort of lushness and rich sound. It's focusing more being musical than necessarily technically inclined. The technicalities of the Neo, and I'm going to start with the technicalities, are perhaps a little bit under what you would expect at $200. Okay, I particularly didn't find that to be its forte. No, its forte is, in my opinion, how musically organic it is, and that's the same situation that happens with your serial, by the way. I mean, the serial is $300, and at $300 you have IEMs which are way more technical, but then they lack that lush organic musicality that the serial has, and the same thing applies here to the ARTTI, the R1. Technically, it's I would say, if you consider the price, it's probably the most adequate or the best one when you consider the price, $299, $199, $79. So if I take price into account, probably this one is the one that has the technicalities which are more balanced with the price. But by no means is it a technical beast. I mean, at that value, you take something like the SIMGOT, the EA 500 LM, and technically the LM will walk all over the R1. That's the reality. But now what the R1 offers is again a very nice, organic, lush sound, which has got very much that old school vibe, and that's why I said it reminded me of the serial. And the same thing happens here with the Neo. The Neo has got that old school vibe going, and so the PENON ISN typical signature has been done perfectly, because I think that's where they focus. They focus on having an IEM where the bass is always very well executed, and that's what we find here. We find a bass that definitely showcases the use of a good quality driver, tuned very well, where then you don't have the negative aspects associated with having too much bass being tuned. And that's exactly what happens here. Yes, okay, fine, there might be one or two songs where there's a little bit of an extra bleed into the mids, since that 100 to 400 area is slightly over energetic, specifically when you consider it's a 6mm driver. But the truth is, what they've done here, what they've tuned, or how they've tuned the 6mm driver handling the bass, in my opinion, is perfect. And it's a testament that, yes, you can have loads of bass if the driver is a good quality driver, which I'm sure that's the case here, and if it's been properly tuned. So if those two criteria are met, then you shouldn't be worried with putting too much bass. You just have to look at some of the IEMs from Fat Freak, for example, to see exactly that, where they have loads, monstrous amounts of bass in the IEMs, but it's been so well tuned and the drivers being used are such high quality drivers that you can get away with that, and definitely that's the situation here. So very nicely executed bass. It's not massive amount of sub bass rumble, but there is some adequate sub bass, good mid bass impact, nice slam, it's clean. It could be a little bit quick, but again, fine. It's a 6mm driver, let's not forget that. Okay, mids very nicely executed, male and female vocals perfectly. I mean, male vocals sometimes get a little bit overly warm because of that mid bass energy, but nothing again that's offensive. Female vocals fine. And then in terms of the upper frequencies, I would have liked a little bit more detail, a little bit more twinklies and sparkles, especially because we are talking about the usage of a planar. But the reality is this: the way they've tuned the planar, there's no metallicness in the sound, there's no tissiness in the sound, there's no sibilance, there's no wrong timbre or tonality. And in terms of that timbre and tonality, I think that's the best technicality that it offers. The soundstage, the imaging, the detailed retrieval, the resolution, all okay, they get by fine, but the timbre and tonality very, very nice. And I would say the resolution as well is actually pretty good. Timbre and tonality and resolution is actually pretty good, are the two best technicalities. Compare them to the IEMs that I selected. Compared to the R1, as I said, these three, they kind of share a lot of common DNA. And I think the determining factor here is more a price thing. Is the Neo 3 $120 better than the R1? I personally don't think so. Okay, I personally don't think so. Having said that, however, is it better? Does it execute what the R1 tries to execute in a better way? Yes, it does. It's got just that extra little bit more of better executed mids, of better executed treble. Everything just comes across just that extra little bit more mature. But again, that's my ears, my gear, my music. Perhaps you might hear it and you might think otherwise. You might think actually the R1 is the better one. I will give the R1 one thing: the bass is more effortless. There are occasions here that, especially when you start turning up the volume a little bit more, where the bass on the Neo 3 does kind of seem that, okay, I'm getting to the limits now, all right? But that's, I mean, listening to it at stupid levels, not the levels that I would say I would recommend for long listening periods. So when you start cranking up the volume, that can come across a little bit of, it being a little bit more edgy. Having said that, it does scale well, mind you, it does scale well. So I would say the R1 just slightly better in terms of the effortless in which the bass is done. Again, it's an 8mm driver, and displacement is displacement. That's the reality. The build quality there is also quite good. It's like I said, look, it's, if you can't afford the Neo and you want to, let's say, do this path of reaching the serial as the ultimate, then definitely the R1 is the first one that you should get. Then maybe upgrade to the Neo 3, sell it if you have to. If you don't, keep it, and that would be an interesting way. And then ultimately, when you are able to get the serial, compared to the serial, since I've been talking about the serial is just a better IM. It does everything the Neo 3 wants to do, and it just does it that extra bit more. I will give the Neo 3 one thing perhaps over the serial, which is there are occasions where the bass there in the serial, because of the quantity that is present, since it's a 10mm driver, can be a little bit overpowering, while here it is balanced more times. Okay, so I would say that balance, that coherency, maybe the Neo 3 does just take the edge over the serial. As compared to the Phoenixcall, they again are actually quite similar in their overall sound, not as different as you would think. That's got a 7mm for the bass, dual BAs for the mids, and then dual planars as well, like the Neo for the highs. The dual BAs and the dual planars do make that part of the frequency range of the mids, upper mids, and treble sound just that little extra more detailed and clean over the Neo. They do. Now, is it better overall? Some people complained about this being a little bit forward, and the reality is the pin again is relatively early pin again, and peaks relatively early. It peaks before 2K. So that forwardness can work for it and against it. So I would say it's depending on what you like or what your preference is. But technically, I think the thing that will then separate these two IEMs the most is that there is technically more capable than the Neo. It's got better soundstage, better imaging, better detail retrieval, better resolution, and the timbre and tonality, I would say, is about the same. But technically, that's a better IEM. In terms of its overall musicality, look, if I have to be 100% fair, I would say this is a tie. There isn't enough differences here for me to say, no, this is the better one, this is the worse, or vice versa. If I look purely in terms of price, I mean, that's $120, this is $199. That is the better deal. I repeat again, they are very, very similar, very, very similar. With regards to the RTR1, it is easier for me to say that this one is the better IM, although as well the price factor must be considered. The serial we've spoken, and finally the unique melodies, the 3DT. The 3DT, 2 7mm for the basses, and then it's got 10mm handling the mids and the highs. And although it's got a a single driver handling the majority of the frequency range. And you would think that okay, there's advantages to that, or because they don't have to do any driver coherence, so like they have done here between the 6 and the 5.8 millimeter. The reality is it sounds better here. That they can sound a little bit edgy at certain points of the frequency response above 1K. While here you don't get that. I didn't get that. It's a smoother sounding IEM. It's a better executed sound. It just sounds better. In terms of bass, that's a single 6, that's dual 7s. The fact that it's dual 7s does allow for that mid bass bump to be a little bit more tamer, and that does open up the mids. Yes, that's true. The mids there do sound slightly more open, and then ultimately it does translate into slightly better technicalities. But the truth is this, that's $399. That's twice the price of that. So if I put things here into a different context, for the price of the UM, I can buy the Neo, and I can buy the Phoenixcall, and I can almost buy the R1, and that does not beat the 3. That does not beat this. That does not beat the Phoenixcall. That only slightly outdoes the R1. Okay. So, this is, I think, a testament to how things have evolved. It is an IEM that was perhaps good in its day, and I like it, and that's why I have it still, and I can appreciate it for what it is. But it's in my opinion, it's no match for the Neo 3. The Neo 3 does have enough going for it to make it a more sensible choice if you buy it from scratch. And that's it, guys. I hope I was able to kind of position the Neo 3 and so that you guys can understand how it sits. I was trying to avoid to kind of do this, this one is better, this one is worse, because all IEMs ultimately, especially in the current market, all IEMs, when we're talking about certain brands and what they've gotten us used to, they are going to be good, so it's unfair and unjust for me to now sit over here and say, no, this is now the latest and the greatest, and this is the best, and you must sell whatever you have and go fetch this. No, this is a very nicely executed dual DD and planar IEM. It's got a nice, very musical, very entertaining, very mature style of organic sound. It's well accessorized. There's really no real flaws that I can point, other than that technically it could be slightly better, especially when you consider that it's got $199. I mean, I would say the technicalities of this are about the same level as the technicalities of the R1. So I guess you will understand what I'm trying to say there. That's it, guys. I'll show you another graphs and we'll wrap it up. Hi guys, welcome now to the graph section here for the Neo 3, and let me do away here with some of these graphs so that we can see what we want to see. There. Okay, so this is the graph of the Neo 3. I mean, graphically, huge bass, which when you actually listen to it doesn't translate to this hugeness that you see graphically. Like I said, let's not forget it's a 6mm driver. Kind of reminds me of the case of the CCA HM20. When people saw the graph, they thought, oh my god, this is going to be an absolute bass monster. And yes, it's got plenty bass for a 7mm driver. Absolutely fantastic. Probably one of the better 7mm applications or smaller driver applications that I've seen in terms of bass. Phenomenal bass. And this is the same situation. Huge bass graphically on paper. We're talking about roughly a 10 dB gain to the bass, about an 9 dB gain, pinna gain here for the mids. So you would say that, oh, okay, prominence on the bass. But when you actually listen to it, not so. What you do notice is that yes, that 100 to 400 hertz area is quite energetic, and that does then translate to a slight bleed here and there on some male vocals. but not as much as what you would think by looking at the graph. Okay, so now let's start showing you some stuff. Compare then to the RTR1, and this is the RTR1 using a wide bore tip. The R1 does have slightly more sub bass. It doesn't have the mid bass as strong as on the Neo 3, but not it's very difficult to actually hear the difference in a significant manner. But what that does translate into is less bleed and a slightly cleaner mids. But I mean the difference is very, very minimal. And then the interesting part is, although here graphically they actually look very similar, above this 1K area and even the past 10, the ARTTI does somehow give me slightly better technicalities, especially sound stamps. This does seem slightly larger on the ARTTI than it does on the Neo 3. And like I said earlier, I mean, in terms of its technical performance, I would say the technical performance of the Neo 3 is about on the level of the ARTTI R1. Okay. Next on your serial, so that we can see the three and how I said, or how I consider that these three have kind of got the same style of sound. If you've noticed, I've basically normalized the serial and the ARTTI at around 500 Hertz, while I've left the Neo slightly above. And I've left it above because this is how it kind of does sound like to me. I would say this is how they come across. And the interesting thing is here that although you might think that, okay, but the mids here, or the transition from the mids into the upper mids in the serial seem recessed compared to the others. No, when you actually listen to it, it doesn't. And again, it has to do with the fact that it's an 8mm driver being used here for the mids. So that 8mm driver has got a lot more presence than what you would expect from a 6mm driver, which is the case of both the ARTTI and the Neo 3. In terms of the bass, again, you look and you think, oh, okay, the serial's it's got the least bass. No, it's a 10mm driver. There's no replacement for displacement, as sometimes the car guys say. It's just the most mature sounding of the three. It's just the best. It's like I said, I think it's the logical, it's the end game in the step. You start at ARTTI, go on to the Neo, go on to the serial. That's my opinion. So let me just take away here this and this, and now let's show here. So PENON serial, RTR1, Phoenixcall, and the UM. So let's start here first with the UM. Where is it, UM? Here we go, 16, number 16. So let's take away some of these other ones that are here unnecessarily. Okay, the unique melodies is this. Again, it's dual 7s, so the difference that there is in terms of overall bass energy or presence is not like you would think. The bass in terms of quality, yes, it is a leaner bass, especially in the mid bass. And it doesn't bleed into the mids, so it does allow the mids to come across in a more open manner. Now, the balance that is struck is, in my opinion, not as agreeable or not as satisfying as the balance that is struck on the Neo 3. The Neo 3 just sounds more organic, more musical, more satisfying in that aspect, while the other one has a more cold, clinical sound. And then the UM has a tendency of sounding just a little bit unpolished somehow. It's difficult to explain, but when you listen to one and the others back to back, like I was doing, it sounds good. It's a really good IEM, but it sounds. You say to yourself, it's $399. This is, the Neo is $199. I would expect that same level, or at least more of polishness and no, it sounds harsher. Okay, and then finally the Phoenixcall over there. There we go. And the Phoenixcall, as you can see, also has got some similarities in the graph. The bass kind of is about the same. And were it not for this early pinna gain, which peaks at about 1.5, 1.6, which makes the vocals be more forward, and that little extra energy as well there in the upper mids and treble, the bass would actually sound the same. That's the reality. But the added benefit of having this and that is that you get improved technicalities. So technically, the Phoenixcall is superior IEM. It's got more it's got slightly larger soundstage. The technicalities match the price and exceed the price. Let's put it that way. Okay. And the other thing that as well, because you've got this little extra amount of energy that you have here, which makes that 7mm sound just a little bit more snappier. Okay, while if you recall, I mentioned that the Neo can sometimes sound just a little bit slow on one or two songs. Okay, it lacks that incisiveness. With the Celest, you don't notice that. It just sounds that extra snappier, a little bit more tighter. Okay, and that's also to do with the fact that you got more there's more energy here in this 1 to 2K area, and then again in this 3 to 6K area you got a little bit more energy, a little bit more of that cleanliness to help out, just clean the notes of the bass. And that's it, guys. I mean, there's really not much more I can say. I think it's a solid IEM. I think it's an IEM that will above all be appreciated by the more let's say seasoned HiFi, or not HiFi, by the more seasoned hobbyists, and not so much an early or a beginner. A beginner might not appreciate it for what it is, and that's why I said if you're a beginner and you want to try a multiple dynamic driver IEM, maybe then go for something like the ARTTI R1 if you want something more serious, or maybe even go for something like the Caster. The Caster is again a very nice IEM for a dual DD. It sounds fantastic, so you could maybe start off with the Caster, which is a nice cheap $15-16. Then if you want something which is an upgrade, who knows, maybe go for something like the Aoshida, the E20, or then straight away into the ARTTI R1. And then if you want to upgrade from that, then you could again go on to something like the Neo 3, and then ultimately if you want to go for the more serious thing, either the serial or the quattro, because by then you will already know what is the sound that you are wanting. You're wanting a more bass heavy sound, which is what you get in the quattro, or you want a more balanced out sound, which is what you get in the serial, and the Neo 3 follows that more balanced type of sound, more coherent across the whole frequency range. Okay, guys, as always, like and subscribe. Any other questions you might have, please feel free to ask me. Okay, take care now. Bye bye.